Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Chag Sameach. This is, of course, the yearly 10-minute Torah for Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. Shmini Atzeret this year does indeed fall on Shabbat, so double greeting. So hope you are having or had a great Sukkot, depending on when you're looking at this. This time it's really kind of my favorite time. I tell people that my favorite season is summer, and it is. But for me, there's a very special time right now in the fall when we go through the seventh month of Tishrei. We have Rosh Hashanah, we have our days of awe, we have Yom Kippur, and then we build our Sukkot, which for us is very, very exciting. I just love putting up a Sukkot. And then you get to eat in it, you get to hang in it, and then we've got Shmini Atzeret, the 8th day of assembly, culminating in Simchat Torah, and then a week later we have the new month of Heshbon, which not much going, in fact, nothing's going on in Heshbon other than the usual, which you kind of need after that whole month. Somebody mentioned to me that it's if you're a rabbi like myself, it's very, very busy, which it is. A lot of preparation goes into this. I usually start about 2 months out, getting everything ready, getting schedules ready, figuring out the service, getting the Torah readings correct, and all that. So I wish all of you a happy New Year, Chag Sameach. May you all be inscribed and sealed in the book of life, etc. Okay, so let's talk about both portions. And as usual, as typical, our holidays do have special portions. Shmini Atzeret, I can't figure out why they have the portion that they do, which is in Deuteronomy. And it opens up with tithes. It's a fairly long, it's a typical parsha. It's almost like a full chapter or a triennial cycle, whereas the other Torah portions tend to be a little bit shorter. But this opens with tithes, talking about the tithe, and the explanation from the Art Scroll Machzor for Sukkot, of which Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are included, says that this is typically the time of the year when everybody brings in their tithes. Now, tithe, just to refresh, is the old Greek word for tenth, and it's when everybody brings their offerings or their tax. That's really what it was, a tax, to the temple for the Kohanim and the Levites. And then after discussing that, it basically goes into the idea of giving charity. You know, you've got your 6-year cycle, 2-3 years, and then the Shemitah year when you let the land grow fallow, and we've got no activity. So what do? We study Torah, we read Deuteronomy, we go to the temple, and we hear Deuteronomy read, etc. But it talks about the idea that the first year, your tithe goes to the Kohanim, second year the Levites, third year it's to the poor and the destitute, to help them survive, and then it repeats the 3-year cycle, and then 7th year. It also talks about the fact that the 7th year is the year of remission. So if somebody owes you money, or somebody is working for you paying off a debt, well, that 7th year, if they haven't paid it back or paid up their debt in that 7th year, then that's it, they're done. Now, this always brings up the idea of, well, if you're going to lend somebody money and say you're in the 6th year of the 7-year cycle, people are like, I'm going to wait till I'll give you a loan, but let's wait 2 years, right? So I can have my full 6 years. God says, don't do that. He says, you do that, and I'm going to remember that. If you do give them the loans, as you should, and you have to release them without being paid fully, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of the debt. Doesn't mean that God's going to write you a check. And, how does God sign a check? Does he go Yud-Hey, Vav-Hey, or whatever, right? No, it's divine justice. That's what it is. The more things you do for people, the more it comes back to you. And people can talk about the metaphysical concept of karma or justice, what you put out, you get back. But in a real sense, when you do good things, you are a good person, and people are attracted to you. People want to do things with you and for you because they trust you. They know you're honorable. They know you have integrity. So there is actually a very real-time, real-world advantage to being generous and being magnanimous. It comes back to you. Okay. So then the Torah portion goes on to discuss the idea of the three pilgrimage holidays. Doesn't really say much about Shmini Atzeret, right? What is Shmini Atzeret anyway? Well, it comes at the end of Sukkot. And there has been discussions as to whether Shmini Atzeret is part of Sukkot or whether it's its own separate holiday. And the general feeling, the general sense is that Shmini Atzeret is its own festival. So you've got the offerings, and we go back to the Torah. Now, again, we rebuild the temple. And what do? Do we go back to doing offerings? I personally don't think so. I know the Torah says we do. It gives all instructions, the Kohanim, the Levites. I understand that there are people in Israel that are studying the laws for the time when the temple is rebuilt and to make sure that we're on target with what the Torah is telling us to do. On the other hand, we have Jeremiah, and I always wonder if it was Isaiah or Ezekiel, or maybe both of them, that said basically God doesn't really care about your offerings that you give God. God wants the offering of your heart, your sincerity, right? And I personally think that after 2,000 years of not doing animal sacrifices, we're done with that. The common method of religion is prayer. I see that as an evolution. I think that maybe in another few hundred years, 300, 400, 500 years, whatever, religion is going to be meditation. It's going to be different. It's going to be actually, delving into your spiritual being, the way we've been working on, for our existence as a human race, right? So that's kind of my thinking. So anyway, going back to Sukkot, there is a whole succession of offerings, starting with 13, I think it starts off with 13 bowls and works its way down every day. And totally, they would offer 70 bowls, one bowl for each of the ancient nations. Shmini Atzeret, completely different offering. It's a very light offering, and compared to Sukkot anyway. And the idea, the way they describe it, is that God is the king, had a big party for all his peoples, and then when it was time to end the party, God's like, hey, you know what, Israel, why don't you hang back a little bit? Let's just you and us, or me and all of you. Let's just us, just have our own little private gathering, and that's what Shmini Atzeret is, the eighth day of assembly. So people feel it's not really part of Sukkot, even though it kind of falls along right after the day after Sukkot. Simchat Torah, a little bit easier to fathom. I kind of think the Torah portion may be a little contrived. Maybe the real connection is the fact that it's all about assembling. I don't know. I really don't. This is one of those things that stumps me. And the rabbis, obviously, this is what they do. This is what they did, studied it intricately. They could probably recite Torah verses by heart, and they figured it out, so there's a good reason. And by the way, this is also the same reading for some of Passover and Shavuot, the second day. So it's a fairly common reading. The idea is generosity. And we should always be thinking what we can do for our fellow person. During our morning prayer service, one of the great rabbis would sit there and say, right as he's starting praying, I hereby accept upon myself the commandment to love my neighbor as myself. So, Simchat Torah, beautiful festival. It's pomp, it's circumstance. We read the Torah. We read the end of Deuteronomy in the evening. The next day, we read the end of Deuteronomy, roll it back to Genesis, and we do the first chapter of the creation, and then the first 3 verses of the second chapter, which is about Shabbat. We carry around the Torahs, we sing, we dance. It's a lot of fun. The Torah reading is exactly that. We're finishing up the reading. Now, the Torah portion that we read, the last portion of Deuteronomy, the Zot HaBracha, these are the blessings. We do not read that. It is the only reading in the Torah, the only parsha, which is not read on a Shabbat. And I do not know that Simchat Torah ever occurs on Shabbat. Our calendar is set up so that certain holidays only fall on certain days. You will never get Yom Kippur falling on a Friday, for example, because you have no way to prepare for Shabbat, right? And they didn't have refrigerators back then. So there it is. So the same thing with Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. Simchat Torah does not coincide with Shabbat. So V'zot HaBracha is the portion that's read. It's the tail end of Deuteronomy. It's the end. Moses blesses the tribes the same way that Jacob blessed the tribes and his sons and goes off, to the world to come. And it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful ending, and it's nice that we roll the Torah and go back to Genesis, the pomp and circumstance of Simchat Torah, which, by the way, is a modern holiday. You will not find Simchat Torah in the Torah because the idea of reading various portions during certain times of the year, that's a fairly recent occurrence, 500 years or so old. So I think it was Maimonides that conceived of that. So there it is. So I'm going to presume that all of you have been sealed in the book of life for another year, a happy, healthy, prosperous year. Just remember the days of all, folks, as we go forward. You're going to have days of frustration when you really want to, I do it myself, but just remember that fasting, remember why we did it, remember the idea that we want to be better people, we want to serve Hashem, we want to serve our fellow Israel, and we want to serve our fellow human race better, because one more person makes us a better place. Shabbat Shalom, good Yontif, Happy New Year, and we will see you again.